Over the past 2 years, our family has been exploring Philippine culture through countless trips and adventures of Filipino food, flora, fauna, and fun, spanning dozens of islands across the country. Today, we're digging deeper into its rich history at Manila's National Museum of Fine Arts to gain a more complete understanding of the experiences that shaped the Filipino people over the past century and a half.
There are 3 national museums. There's anthropology, natural history, and fine arts, which is the building that we're gonna go check out now. It was built in 1901.
This museum has a total of 29 galleries and hallways, and we're going into gallery number 1, which features some of the oldest works in the museum. These are from the 17th century to the 19th century, so it's during the Spanish occupation period.
I think it's crazy how everything in here is actually made out of wood. Like a lot of the things that you'd look at, it'd be like, oh, that's wood. Then a lot of the others, it kind of looks like metal or maybe stone, but no, everything's wood.
The focal point of this room is the retablo behind me, which means behind the table or above the table. But this was taken from the oldest stone church in the Philippines. It was St. Nicholas Church in Bohol. Because Bohol is one of the oldest Spanish colonized islands in the country because they started in Cebu and then Bohol was soon after to be colonized by the Spanish. And that's what brought in the Catholic religion to the country. It was made by Filipino and Chinese workers, but it's just beautiful and it's so big. I hope the camera can capture how big it is. It takes up the entire room, almost floor to ceiling. It's on just a little bit of a ledge, maybe just 3 feet up, and then it goes way up to the ceiling.
1 meter.
1 meter. 1 meter!
2 other things about it. Number 1, it's over 300 years old, so a very, very old piece of art that's in here. And number 2, even though it's part of the oldest stone church in the country, it's actually made completely out of wood, just like Cole said.
You can really see the representation of the Catholic religion in this room. So many carvings of the crucifixion, saints, Immaculate Conception, a lot of representation here. We're actually gonna just walk through gallery 2. We can't film all of the pieces of work of the galleries because some of them are on loan by the owners and you can't film them without the owner's permission.
So now we're walking into gallery 5.
And I'm so excited about this gallery because I have recently been learning more and more about Jose Rizal. He is a national treasure, a national hero. I am by no means a historian, but I do love history and I love finding really inspiring people in history. And Jose Rizal is absolutely that figure for the Philippine people. A lot of you watching might already know because Rizal was considered the face of the Filipino independence. He's a big historical figure. But just to give a little bit of background, just in case you need it, he was a nationalist, he was an author, he was also an artist, which we'll show you a little bit more in this room, but he was a big component of non-violent resolve for political issues, which at the time was the Spanish occupation. The Filipino people were oppressed, and because he was such a well-loved figure and was a part of some of the uprising, because he had his non-violent cause, the Spanish threw him in prison in the island of Mindanao. But after the uprising of the insurrection in 1896, they executed Rizal while he was in captivity. And then it took 2 more years for the Philippines to gain its independence from the Spanish. And that ended a 333-year-long occupation here.
The works on this side of the gallery are actually works from Rizal. So the sculptures over here, the drawing of the building over here, and even this painting.
I don't know if I feel worse for the puppy in the alligator's mouth or the alligator being bit to shreds by a dog because it's trying to eat food.
This is Juan Luna, the most famous artist in the Philippines. Ironically, his adult life he lived mostly in Spain and in France, in Paris, France. He was also known for being good friends with Rizal, but he has a very uplifting and also tragic history to him. We're gonna start with his most controversial piece of artwork, and it's called A Portrait of a Lady. It's said to be a portrait of his wife at bedtime clutching the rosary, but there are many, including me, who don't believe that it's a painting of his wife at all. Some believe that it could have been one of his French mistresses that he was known to have. A lot of people notice the skin tone is very different than his wife. The facial features are very different than his wife's, but it's so connected to his wife because it's said to be cursed. Because 2 years after he painted this, she was murdered by Luna himself. He was known as being egotistical and had a very bad temper and also very jealous. And he accused her of having an affair, which she had never admitted to, never been proven. And he, in a jealous rage, chased her up the stairs into a room where herself and her mother and their son was in. And he shot through that door, killing Paz, his wife, and her mother, and his son was not shot. He survived. But then I think just a few years after that, Luna died himself. After his wife's death, he stopped painting entirely. But the curse didn't just stop there. It's said that everybody who's come to own this painting has had businesses destroyed, illnesses, and even death occurred to them. This was donated to the museum by Imelda Marcos, and we all know how things turned out for her.
And since he never said that it was his wife, scholars actually believe that it was Angela Duche who was his favorite French model for some of his works.
And this is just a photo of one of Luna's paintings. It's said to have been destroyed in a fire, but after he painted it, he intended to submit it to the Chicago World's Fair in 1892, but he didn't because of the death of his wife. Now we're going to Gallery 9.
This gallery is dedicated to heroes and historical figures and personalities, so it's all portraits of important people in Philippines culture.
And this is a portrait of Dr. Phil. Just kidding, but he's American.
On this side, they have portraits of the former presidents in the Philippines. This section is dedicated to a famous Filipino portrait artist. His name is Fernando Armorsola y Cueto. I am so sorry. I butchered pronouncing that. I am trying, if that is any consolation. But all of these paintings in here were commissioned, and he was a very talented artist, but he unfortunately passed away in the middle of one of his pieces of work, which is right here, along with some pieces of furniture and some other items from his studio.
They also painted a portrait of me. See right here? Colt in the Wild. It's clearly what it says. It's just in Tagalog, so can't really tell, but...
Not even close. And he's the same artist who does all of the presidential portraits in here.
Gallery 12 is dedicated to the sculptor Guillermo Tolentino. He was a national artist, a very famous Filipino sculptor.
What's a national artist?
I don't know. I just want to point out that this description of Guillermo right here says Guillermo Tolentino was proclaimed National Artist for Sculpture in 1973. Couldn't have said it better myself.
No, it's got to be a typo.
Well, joking aside, Guillermo was a fellow artist with Fernando Armorsola, who we just learned about his portraits, and they dominated the Philippine art scene from the 1930s to the 1950s.
And this is actually a drawing of the base of the Bonifacio Monument. And that's what's in the pictures behind me.
Our next stop is Spolarium Hall, so it's not technically a gallery, but I think this is the place that Aaron is going to be most excited about.
This is where they keep the highlight of the museum, the biggest piece of artwork that Juan Luna created, and oh my gosh, I was not expecting it to be this big. That is ginormous. Wow, I'm like almost speechless. I have so much to say about this piece of work, but I'm just in awe about how big it is. It takes up the entire room. And now I know what the hype is about. Wow, this is an amazing piece of art.
So clearly the entire hall is named after this one work, because that work is called Spolarium. And Spolarium is the term for basically the basement beneath a gladiator coliseum.
Yeah, it's where they would take the dying or the dead gladiators after they battled. And it was a place of grief and chaos and carnage. Yes. And it's supposed to represent, a lot of people say that it represents what was happening in the Philippines at the time. The gladiator era was much further in the past in history, but what was going on at the time that Luna painted this was the Philippines' oppression against the Spanish colonization. It had been almost 300 or about 300 years that they had been colonized by Spain, and they were oppressed. They were treated like slaves at times, and they wanted to fight for their independence. So that's when heroes like Rizal and Bonifacio started rising up. But what Juan Luna did was he depicted some of those struggles and resilience in his works. But honestly, me standing here now and looking at this, it is, I think, a depiction of resilience. I see a lot more strength looking at it in person than I imagined reading about it. To me, like just reading about it, seemed like it was a painting of war, of battle, of pain. But this to me looks like fighting through the pain, fighting through loved ones dying and being hurt. It's really remarkable. It's another example of seeing things for yourself and not just reading about them. So we hope that with our travels and with our videos that we encourage people to travel, not just around the world, but within your own country, and learn about history by seeing these pieces in person instead of just reading about them online or in a book. So Cole, what are your thoughts on this painting?
I think it's super cool, and it's super big, which is really cool. I like the cool chain add-ons on the sides, and it looks like there were gladiators and they're injured, hurt, or dead, and they're being dragged to safety.
Yeah, I love that he pointed out the frame. The frame is actually really gorgeous too, and it really adds to the artwork. Luna finished this in 1884. It took him 8 months to do it. It earned him his first gold medal from the Exposition Nacional de Bellas Artes, and he later earned 2 more gold letters, but this was his first and probably the most significant.
And he was only 26 years old when he did this painting. That's going to do it for us today, but if you want to visit, a couple of things of note. Number one, they are open 6 days a week, so Tuesday through Sunday. The hours every day are going to be 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., and entrance fees don't exist. You can come for free. If you have a larger group, like 20 people or more, then you can go to the website and pre-register so you can save yourself some time when you show up.
Well, if you liked this museum, if you liked any of the pieces of work, if you like any of us, then please hit that like button. We'd really appreciate it. And we'd appreciate a comment. We love hearing from you. We try to get to as many of them as we can. But if you haven't subscribed yet, that's the most important one of all. And then we will see you in the very next episode. His name was Fernando. His name is Fernando Amorsolo. His name was Fernando Amorsolo y Cueto. And he worked that Juan Luna created, and oh my gosh, I was not expecting it to be this big.
That's what he said.
That is ginormous. Some of those struggles and resilience in his photos. So honestly, like looking at it now,
I said in his photos.
In his work.